Hello, my name is Zavanya Shukla, and this is my co-host Karen Marooney, and you're listening to Gradient Dissent Business. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, everybody. We're thrilled to be here with Paul. He's the co-founder and CEO of Supabase. What is Supabase? It's a open source Firebase alternative. For those of you that are even thinking of building, you can build in a weekend, but you can scale to millions with Supabase. So welcome, Paul. And why don't you tell people what you do in your words, because they'll be way better than mine.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And thanks for having me. That's a great intro. Actually, you kind of nailed it. We're a platform for builders. We provide tools specifically for builders who want to get started very fast. Most importantly, we provide the database layer. So we offer a Postgres database. And then on top of that, we've got a couple of other tools, an authentication system, a storage layer for large files, some edge functions for heavy compute, and then some auto-generated APIs. And then most relevant for this podcast is we also have this vector offering powered by pgvector, which is an extension for Postgres.
So Paul, one of the things that our audience is trying to wrap their heads around is like, we had the MLOps stack, and now we have the LLMOps stack. I think we're close to getting the multimodal models out, so we're going to have the AIOps stack. Like, what do you think that stack looks like? And then how does Supabase fit into it?
Yeah, well, so we're extremely popular for the builders. So, you know, for reference, just to put some numbers around it, we launch around 11,000 databases every week. And a lot of them are launching with maybe a front-end framework like Next.js or like a React type framework. And so it's largely like a JavaScript and database system. So I think that, you know, we've got a different view from probably what a lot of the ML engineers see. But, you know, actually the use cases are converging. So what started in Supabase with a lot of JavaScript is now actually moving a lot more towards Python users and different use cases, largely driven by, you know, the LLM type use cases. But, you know, what people are building is roughly the same. We see a lot of these applications that are pretty similar to you know, everything else. A lot of them kind of trying to discover what is the new app that will be built. And at this stage, they kind of look like three different things. It's always going to be around like chat with characters, chat with your docs, or some sort of generative character system.
And what are the most, like, I guess you have this really interesting view into the apps that people are building using LLMs. So like, there's the obvious ones that you mentioned, but like, have you seen anything that's like really exciting that people are non-obvious app based on LLMs?
And how much of them are not okay for work? I'm curious. Just like when people are building, where does it start? Where does it go? I mean, you're seeing all the early stuff, so I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are, of course, safe for work, but the most interesting ones actually are not safe for work. We've got one on our platform that scaled from 0 to 1 million users in 10 days. So that's almost as fast as ChatGPT. And
and it's not,
not safe for work. You know, chat with character. No, exactly.
Let's talk vector databases. And I know, can you explain to people how you think about multimodal and, you know, in layman's terms, how you can add video and other modes into the database? Like, how do we think about that?
So multimodal is definitely becoming a thing now, especially with ChatGPT adding it. So everyone's far more interested in what they can do and how they can build. We're seeing a lot more. So out of those databases that we're seeing where they're storing embeddings, I think like maybe last week or the week before, we're checking how many of them, what type of embeddings they're using. 98% of them are using Adder 2 by OpenAI. So almost everything is actually storing just text. And then now there's a trend upwards for Clip, a lot of people starting to use Clip to embed images largely. And then, of course, one of the products that I said was storing large files. You, of course, want to take them, store them separately, and then take the embeddings around it and store that in your database so that you can do similarity. These are quite interesting use cases for us, but I've got to say it's very nascent. I'm quite excited to see what people will build around it and what the different use cases are. We're seeing a lot of, at the moment, the similarity for images largely around not safe for work, because you might want to segment what you think is a not safe for work image out of your embeddings database, maybe by a partition, and remove that data so it doesn't slow down, say, your indexes, your searches, and you don't have to, of course, pay for that storage.
But are there other applications like that for because multimodal is going to come, it's going to be the big thing very soon. How can companies think about other applications for multimodal for themselves, and how can they prep themselves, and why would they want to use Supabase?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two ways to think about it. The generative aspect and then the RAG type approaches. Very nascent in the RAG use cases. So
will you tell our audience, what a RAG is, just in case people don't know? There might be people.
Sure. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation, and that's where you might find a relevant set, let's say for text. If you're going to generate an answer from your documentation, you'll have someone ask a question like, how do I use weights and biases? And then you'll take that question, you'll turn it into an embedding, then you search your database and you might find the top K results, say 5 results. Then you send all of those results and the question to a generative model, and it will spit out an answer based on the results that you have. So it's very useful for anything that's in the private domain where an LLM wouldn't have ingested it. So any private data. And so, yeah, when we're moving into multimodal, then what you might want to do is find relevant images. For example, let's say they want to generate a image of a, I don't know, cow and a duck or something like that. You might want to actually find 5 images that kind of look like that so that it can do it more precisely than just the model has been trained on. So it might be relevant to your specific cow and duck that you want to generate.
Interesting. It's like fine-tuning using that.
It's a bit like fine-tuning. This is like another tool on the belt, essentially. You can either let the large language model do it, or whichever model that you've got. You can add, enhance it with RAG based on some data that you've got, or you can then fine-tune it based on probably a lot of interactions that you've had with your community. And we're seeing a lot more of this at the moment as well now, where people are storing, all of the questions that that people might ask. Then they're seeing the ratings that might be generated. So people can give a thumbs up, thumbs down, and then you use those results to fine tune later on. So, yeah.
Can I selfishly ask you like this? Because I feel like every 3 months the answer changes, but do you see people fine tuning, or do you see people using rounds to tune the models? And also just to give context, those of us who come from the machine learning space find it the obvious answer is we're going to fine tune, we know how to fine tune, we have the infrastructure, right? But most of the people doing this don't know how to train a model, don't have the GPUs. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, actually in our space, mostly people are just improving the prompt, so evals on the prompt, if that actually. So they're very much just waiting for the models to improve. And the way that I kind of see the lay of the land at the moment is kind of, you've got several layers, right? So you've got the application, then you've got the models, then you've got the databases, then you've got the systems below. And as you go deeper and deeper, sort of the churn is lower. So applications are churning very fast. They're getting spun up. We've had one open source template, which is kind of chat with your docs, which has launched 5,000 databases on Supabase. So a lot of people doing that use case, even for that specific open source app. Then you've got the models, which of course are improving at a rapid rate. Then you've got the databases, which all of them are improving, both traditional and specialized. And then, of course, you've got NVIDIA down the bottom, who's just winning everything.
Paul, like you didn't start out building a company to build vector databases, but you were able to pivot to it, sounds like pretty fast, and become one of the leading players. What is so special about how you think about products and how you think about like running your org that makes you so adaptable to new big changes?
Yeah, a lot of what we think about when we're building is just providing the sort of core primitives that any business might need, so any developer might need. So the ones that we said, like database or storage, file storage, these ones are kind of key to everything that almost every business. So not a specific use case, but very general. And then into each of these products, we build extensibility. And luckily with Postgres, it's got extensibility built in. So we're always thinking, what will a developer need for the next 10 years? And how do we make it extensible so that no matter what the next wave is, this current wave is largely around embeddings, but ideally it can be kind of added very easily as a primitive on top. And so we literally merged it within a week into our platform, built some docs around it, and within a month, people were building with pgvector.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost like you're building the Lego blocks for businesses, and then they're very extensible, so you can build it. So do you have any advice for how different startups can think about what their version of the Lego block is? And then second question is how do you think about hiring the team? Because it sounds like your team was super adaptable too. In a week it was out, Not everything can do that.
Oh yeah, well, I guess to start from the second one, that one's a funny story. So I actually got this email from an open source contributor, and he said, I'm using Supabase, and I really need this extension, and here's a pull request. Can you merge it in so I can start building with it? So I got on a call with him, and I actually didn't know about pgvector at the time, and we talked through it. And then it seemed cool, so we merged it, and literally 2 days later, he had kind of built something. And then the first use case was actually this chat with our docs. Now you see it everywhere, but I think we might have been one of the first to do this system where you ingest all of your docs, and then you can do this generative question and answer using RAG. And it was done by this contributor who then we ended up hiring. And so that's how our whole team functions, actually. We're completely distributed. We employ a lot of open source maintainers. When people are kind of too good to ignore, of course, we want them to build within Supabase all the time and be part of the team.
I think, we're going through the shift where the millennials are the ones who are running the companies now. And companies used to have this very vanilla tone. And now it's you guys are out there with your memes, and other people are becoming more casual and more authentic. And Ken obviously is the queen of knowing how to message your company. So I'm curious what you guys think about the shift in how, especially just look at developer companies. How should you talk to your users? What should be their tone? What's appropriate?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if we even really discussed how our tone would be. Largely what we did was Anne and myself got online and started chatting to them about their problems. And, if they were using it, we engaged with them. And then, if they had issues that they were publicly raised, we would face them and we would confess to them and talk through how we're going to fix it. So I think the tone was just largely, we want to help you build better. And that kind of has become the sort of psyche of our community as a result. We weren't really too focused on architecting any specific tone. It just kind of spilled out the other side of really trying to be helpful to individuals as much as anything.
And I think, Lavanya, you're asking because I've worked with, Mark Zuckerberg for 10 years and Mark Benioff for 13 years and other people not named Mark, like Diane Green or Jeff Bezos for many years, and Reed over at Netflix. And I think a common mistake when you start a company is that you think there's some archetype you're supposed to be, and then everybody just tries to look for lessons, and that's smart and that's good. But then when you try to be like anybody else, you just, it's so, everybody knows it's really painful for you and for everybody who has to watch. And so, and it gets really boring really, really fast. So I think it takes a lot to put yourself out there and to be like, initially when Mark Benioff launched Salesforce, people hated him because he's really a character. And it was like, who's this guy making dolphin sounds and wearing Hawaiian shirts and telling us like everything's going to change? So it's a whole, I think mostly it's embrace the parts that are just you and then be really into your audience and who you're going to serve, because that's all that matters. All the other noise is noise, and you can't focus on being liked. You got to focus on being useful. The one thing that you guys do really specifically, though, is this idea of first principles. I think of you as like a first principle company, and this, for those of you that know Supabase, you're into launch weeks, and they're two different things. Can you talk about how you set principles? Because for those of you that don't know, Supabase is a distributed company. You guys are all over the world, and I think it's really important to have that idea of first principles, especially when you're going to be distributed, which Lavanya and I want to talk more about. But first principles, and then talk to us about launch week.
Yeah, the principled approach is largely an alignment tool, and I think it's useful in any company, but especially around distributed companies, because a lot of what we do is we leave the techies to kind of work on their own. So they're off for a week. They'll have one meeting a week, and then they do their work. And so how do you trust that they're going to work on the right things? You just set up the context by which they can think about the product, think about whatever they're building in the right way. So we've got literally embedded in our docs the way that we think about the product. So for example, two of our principles, one is that everything must work in isolation. So each tool, the database and the auth system, each one can be a standalone product. Then the second principle is that everything works as an integrated system. So even though that they can work as standalone tools, when you pair them together, they kind of create magic. And it's a little bit like the Apple ecosystem. Like you can have a phone, and you can have a MacBook, and you can have the AirPods. And when you connect them together, then you get this awesome synergy between the three systems. But you can also use them individually, and they're also quite nice. So, a lot of these thinking just has to be written down on paper so that you can hand them over to, say, the engineers or anyone else in the business, and they can think along in the same pattern.
So this is fascinating. So how are you building the APIs, designing the APIs so they are compatible with each other as people build their own little tools that work in isolation? And what are the KPIs that you're measuring these eng teams against?
Yeah, so the kind of substrate for us, I think, is Postgres. And that's the fundamental layer at the bottom. Everything else builds up from that. And that's almost the API layer by which everything else can work. So when I say the auth system works standalone, actually it still needs the auth, still needs Postgres. And our large file storage system still needs Postgres. Then to interact between them, they can either use the schemas within the database, and they can be separate, but then you can build, say, foreign keys amongst them. Or if it's two systems, then we kind of think of two primitives that you have, either an API or webhooks. And with those fundamentals, everything else can be joined together and interfaced quite cleanly.
And are the teams designing this together, or is it coming from top down? And also, if you when you're starting a startup, you're like, oh my God, this is my baby. I don't know if I can trust like individual engineers to just go off and build whatever. So like, how do you not go after that sense of control and just like trust the people to build the right thing?
Well, the principles largely are the thing that make sure you can trust, because it was like that at the start. For example, we had a guy join who's an incredible techie. And one of the first things I did with him was I didn't actually give him the principles. I said, come up with some principles yourself. And then I could see how he thinks about the product. And then I compared it to what I've got, and we found a delta. And actually some of the principles shifted based on his thinking. So we kind of converged. And then by the time we got to the end of that exercise, we were just thinking completely aligned. And so I knew, actually, I never have to worry about product again. This guy knows how to build, and I can trust him to make decisions even when I'm away. And the more you can do that across all of your teams. So at the moment we're doing it, say, with our head of growth for sales, and how do we think about the principles for the sales team and how they should sell. And he's going to trickle those down to his team. Then he knows he can hand off a lot of what he's doing at the moment.
Just for our audience, if you could like tell us like what are some of these principles for sales just to help them crystallize?
Yeah, so for example, at the moment, we're extremely focused on our community and the developer persona. And, you know, as you grow, people generally start to lose that focus on the indie developer. So for us, it's really important that, you know, we're going to bake that into our DNA. We do product-led growth. Essentially, the developer comes in, they love the product, and they'll bring it into the organization and sell it for us, essentially, is the idea. And if we do that right, we believe that we can be a really big business. If we lose sight of that, then I think you get this short-term win where you quickly grow around enterprise and then your community tails off and it flatlines. And you can't actually go back at that point. As soon as you lose your community, you become irrelevant. So we want to bake this in. So part of the sales journey is teaching them about PLG. What are the principles? Like, for example, it's not sales, it's consulting. You don't have to tell them that you're going to solve all their problems. If you're not, you need to listen to their problems, find out if we can fix it. If we can't fix it, tell them that and tell the product team so that in the future, maybe we can design some more primitives that might solve their problem later on.
How do you structure your company in a way where the industry is moving fast, the tech is moving fast? You guys are a distributed company. You came from Y Combinator where you're used to like a certain amount of pressure and a certain amount of speed. How do you build your company to deal and like create its own pressure and respond to the changing technology that's at a warp speed?
Yeah, for us, that's our launch weeks. You know, we had this funny thing where we started in 2020, then we went into Y Combinator, and it was the first fully remote batch because of COVID. We did, actually, Ant and I were in Singapore at the time, so we had to do it at 2 a.m. every day. But what happens during YC is that you get all this pressure leading up to demo day. And so we had like 100 days. And I remember I said to one of the engineers, build an interface that looks exactly like Airtable on top of Postgres, and you've got 100 days to do it. And he smashed it. Like, he just knew that this deadline was there. He knew what he had to do. I didn't talk to him, and just he would turn up every week and he would have these awesome improvements. Then we got outside of Y Combinator, and there's kind of this daunting future. Like, nothing is ahead of you. You've just got this big open space which you are meant to develop in. And so we said to ourselves, all right, in 3 months from now, we're just going to move from alpha to beta. And it doesn't matter what we ship, just ship. And then on that day, we just changed it. And we said we've moved from alpha to beta with a kind of landing page. And we saw not only internally was everyone motivated towards that day, we saw this huge incline on the curve. So everyone started launching more databases, new databases. The community grew by 20%, I think, overnight. And we thought, that's actually quite interesting. We literally did not change anything or launch anything. We just changed this kind of positioning. And so we were like really excited by that, and we went away and thought, how can we do it even bigger? And so we thought, well, instead of changing one thing, why don't we ship one major feature every day for a week? And we set that goal sort of 4 months ahead. And then when we did that, it was the start of this kind of launch week activity. And every time we did it, we were just seeing the slope of the curve would change, the community would grow, everyone would get excited about what else they can build. And mostly as well, the community felt that they were listened to because they would actually come attend these launch weeks activities. And that's when they would see the things that we were shipping. It's very hard to get your new features in front of the developers, even if they're asking for it. And so that was the way that we did it. And it's become really a part of how we run the company now. We are, I think, coming up to our 10th launch week in a month or two. And we aim for them every quarter. So it also helps with our company planning.
I just think it's like almost Apple did the same thing with WWDC, and like it's nice to have those self-imposed deadlines. Karen, you get to see an insane amount of amazing companies. Are you seeing other examples of like how companies stay motivated?
I think that the deadlines are incredibly important because it's just too daunting. And when do you call it done? When you're building. Because the people inside the company want to build a great product, and there'll be builders and there'll be polishers and there'll be iterators, and they all need to know when it's pencils down. And it's incredibly hard to decide when it's pencils down. So some companies like Salesforce have Dreamforce, and other companies have these external events. Some companies develop more internal events. So a big deal inside Meta, Facebook, when I was there, is that they have these internal all hands, which they use as forcing functions for the internal groups to have deadlines that they're not quite ready to show the world. But when you're showing them to your peers, you care just as much as when you're showing them externally. So every quarter, Mark Zuckerberg would pick, here's the things that I'm trying to drive. They may not be quite ready for prime time, but these are the deadlines, and I need you to have a working model to show the company on this date. And he would do that across different, and it would be a quarterly thing, even though they would only have Connect once a year or other ship dates. These all hands really helped preface the ship dates. So it was another way, but forcing functions are incredibly helpful because if you don't have a date to work backwards from, you don't have a date to work backwards from.
Super interesting from the Facebook perspective that he's kind of deciding as well the product. As it grew, did he continue to get involved on the product side?
Hell yes.
And how would he determine like what was going to be the priorities in the next quarter?
There are always internal planning meetings where it was decided he thinks in 3, 5, and 10 years. And so there were 3-year markers, and then you have a different cadence of how you see where you are in the 3. And then it's even harder to plan the 5 and 10 year. How do you know where you are on those 5 and 10 year journeys when you're measuring by month? But once you get into a company and your company starts to grow, people can easily get into the mindset of, am I going to make my bonus? And if you do yearly bonuses or you do half yearly bonuses, that ends up being the amount of time that people think about if they've achieved their goals. So how do you then break it into some really important things take longer than 6 months and they can take longer than a year, but how do you know that you're making progress on them and how do you keep it moving quickly? So that's when you set the priorities, but then you need to have some check-ins that show whether or not you think where you are on this roadmap. And it was really important. So he was actively engaged in all of this. You would do a leadership setting of priorities, and that's hard as your portfolio sort of grows of what it is. And then you would also need to understand you have different leaders of each group, and they would say what's possible, and then Mark would push you even harder. One quick story is when I first started at Facebook, it was one of the first F8s. We used to do this user conference. The team was like, Mark is asking us to ship too many things. He wants too many things shipped. go in there and tell him we only have 48 hours and we can only do 10 things. So I went in his conference room. I wrote all the things on the board. I thought I was so, organized and in charge. I handed him a pen and I said, circle the 3 things that you want because we're running out of time. And he looked at the board. He's totally comfortable with silence, so he was really quiet for a while. And he took the pen and he added 3 things. And and I had to go back to the group and be like, yeah, I didn't get him to prioritize. I actually came back with more. They wanted to kill me.
Yeah.
And they shipped all of it. So it was a really terrible lesson in terms of always pushing and me. I think when you've got the best people in the world and you believe in them, it is kind of amazing what they can do. But that was a real moment of yeah, I'm not managing this. It's more like he's pushing us. I get it. I get how this is going to go.
That's amazing. I'm now going to do that to all of our teams. I'm going to
really, the person who has to carry that message back is not liked. It's just thanks, Karen. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still I don't know if I would, how you do it, Paul. It's just trust I guess you have principles that you can ground your people in, but if I had 5 people in it was just go and build whatever, I would have so much anxiety what they're going to come back with, Are you checking in with them? Do you ask for a plan before they start building?
Yeah. So I guess it's not completely hands off. I'm also, I would say, a product CEO. So I love the product, and this is what I'm trying to sort of solve for developers, right? I want to build a product
and you can
that
keep
they
loving
really
the
find
product.
useful.
You can keep being involved. You can and you will. It's
also,
okay. Yes, always.
I can continue to get involved and focus most of my time on that. This is the thing that I think, really differentiates our company. So for example, we're about to start planning for our next launch week, and I'm just going to write down a brainstorming list. Oh, what are the things that people are building? And then I'm going to say, what are the priorities? This one's going to be our 10th launch week. So it's kind of big where I've got this theme that we want to make sure that people know that we're really ready, that it's sort of enterprise ready, especially for 2024. We've already got enterprises building on top of us. How do we make sure that that is in the psyche? So a lot of the product features that we're going to ship are largely just emphasizing that what are the type of things that both indie developers need, but also enterprises need, and how do we position it in a way that's sort of exciting enough for people to actually take notice.
You set the themes, and then the people can come up with individual ways to serve these enterprises or these different buckets.
Yeah, so this one, so because we've got several different teams, they're all we've got teams, and then we've got these cross-cutting initiatives. A really good example is let's say we've got an auth team, and they are going to be, last one they shipped multi-factor authentication. And this they know is table stakes for if they want to build the best in the world. That's what we say to every team. What would the best auth system in the world look like? Give us all of those features, stack rank them, and get to work. And then they really just go through, and from top down in the stack, they try to identify what is the most important thing for all of the developers. And the way that they do it is largely where the principles come from. So we've got to make sure that they think about it in a way that can solve many problems at once, and that is well integrated with our systems. But they have a clear idea. If you hire an auth engineer, they know if you choose an auth engineer worth his salt, he knows exactly the features that need to be shipped. And this is where actually it works well in our model. They'll know better than I do actually what features need to be built, and I just need to make sure that we're pushing towards a deadline.
All right, let's change the pace and do a lightning round. So, Paul, in this lightning round, we're going to ask you a couple questions, and you're going to answer the first things that come to mind. Don't overthink it. Ready?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Introvert or extrovert?
Introvert.
Really?
I couldn't
I don't know if I would
tell.
have guessed that.
Do I
No,
not?
no, I don't know. I
Yeah.
think
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know if I would have guessed that. You seem okay. That's another. You're
doing a
amongst
great
other
job.
introverts. Yeah, no, good for you.
What is the first thing you ever built, and how old were you?
Oh, funnily enough, the first thing that I really remember kind of hacking was like, I remember opening a Word document in Notepad and then like playing with the like kind of code of Word. And that's the first like really hacky thing. I would have been quite young when I did that. But then like the first real thing, because this isn't much of a lightning question, sorry, but the first like real thing that I built actually was in New Zealand, like focused on like an agricultural type use case in abattoirs. Yeah, we can get into that if
We'll
you
get
want,
into
but
that.
yeah, okay.
If you could hack with anyone, dead or alive, who would you hack with?
Yeah, dead would probably be Joe Armstrong, the co-creator of Erlang. Alive would be John Carmack.
Distributed or in person?
Distributed.
I knew the answer to that one.
And that's easy.
I know. Craziest place you've ever met a customer or a potential employee, or is there any like bizarro land?
Oh, yeah. Actually, there's a funny employee story. Yet another open source one, but I've been using this tool called Postgres for many years, and it's actually part of the Supabase stack. And I actually emailed one of the maintainers when we were starting to just see if he's okay that we use it within Supabase. I always ask first. And he said yes, and he also said, oh, by the way, I'm looking for a job. And this is this guy in Peru who of course we employed. And then funnily enough, because we're fully distributed, he had actually never left Peru. So the first ever time he got a passport and left Peru was to come to Munich for our first company offsite to meet the whole team. So I guess that's the strangest employee story, but also one that I'm the most proud of because, you know, it really speaks to our open source philosophy.
That's my hiring philosophy too, and that's why I love working with developers. Like I'm literally on Twitter and looking at what our users are building, and like the people who build the best things, I'm always like, hey, do you want a job? You know, and like that's the kind of people you want to hire because they love your company, they're excited about building them.
Yep.
We gotta get into your life story too in a sec. Okay, 2 more questions, and then we'll get into your life story.
This isn't very lightning. I'm sorry. I'll keep my answers shorter.
Yeah, what are you doing, Paul? Get your shit.
Okay.
What do you say
Together,
in
Paul.
Together. You're here with your board member. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, okay. It's concise.
What do you say in your inside voice that you don't say aloud?
In my inside voice?
Inside
what does
voice
that
in
mean?
your head? Like, what do you say in your head that you don't say out loud?
Man, get me out of this interview. Why did I say yes?
Karen's amazing. You know, she's the best board member ever. I never tell her that. So now's the moment. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. No, I think I try to like.
You're thinking stuff. You're not saying it out loud. What is it?
Oh. That's the joy of being the CEO. You can just say whatever you want, whenever you want. Like I just interrupt as soon as I have a thought. No, I don't know. Like largely, you know, I try to make sure that, you know, if I've got any like real concerns, I voice them immediately. That's actually one of the most important things I think for a distributed company. Otherwise, like there's already lag. You got to cut it down.
So Paul, where did you grow up? And what parts of that growing up helped you know you could start a company or made you believe you could start a company?
Yeah, I grew up in New Zealand. I moved around a lot within New Zealand. And for a brief 3 years, I lived in Thailand actually as a young kid, but then spent most of my childhood growing up in the South Island of New Zealand. I went to a boarding school because I lived on a farm. And I think the thing about growing like building a company, my dad is an entrepreneur who, funnily enough, works in Supabase now. But it didn't actually feel that odd. In fact, it felt more strange working. At one point, I worked in Accenture, and I really did not enjoy it. So I think I've always been more drawn to doing, startups.
And when did your passion for building start? What was the first thing you built that was meaningful, and how did you transition into software?
Yeah. So I started doing websites for people, but then actually I got this weird job. So there's a pork processing company in New Zealand. Once again, it's very Kiwi. It's an agricultural company.
We can tell.
But they have these abattoirs, which I would have to go into, and then I would literally put in these
What is that? Sorry for
an abattoir is like where they. How do I say it?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, you don't know? Okay, it's like where they it's a slaughterhouse. Where they
I'm a vegetarian. This is perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a very strange job, but because New Zealand is like all farm land, basically everything. I had to go into these. Well, I didn't have to, but this was the job. I went into these abattoirs, and I would install and program these like scales and these touch screens, and then I'd build this like automated system where I'd be automating these kind of like abattoir lines, and I just went through the entire business actually and started building software around the processes, and it was everything from hardware to databases to the software and interfaces. I got to do it all because I was the only programmer.
And were you teaching yourself how to build all of these, like all about the databases and assembly code and all that? Yeah,
that was all self-taught. And funnily enough, the first thing that I used was this one called Cold Fusion. You wouldn't really use it anymore as a Adobe software. Yeah. And it was honestly, it was very cool because it allowed you to do real-time systems, which funnily enough is what we build now. It's one of the key features of Supabase is that you can listen to your database in real time. And so it's kind of gone full circle in that's how I started my career, building these like real-time database systems for farmers. Now I build them for developers. And there's this really funny usage pattern. So what farmers would do is they would send their pigs. This was a pig abattoir. They would send them to this processing plant once a month. And then they would just log into this website for one day, watch as their sort of pigs like went across the line, and then they wouldn't log in for another 1 month. So it was completely over-engineered. They don't even need it in real time for this one hour of usage, but it was very good for my learning.
It's like almost like you were meant to build this company, and like everything in your life like led you back to building this. But that's beautiful.
But who would have known a pig farm?
Who would have known?
Yeah, from a farm to a startup. Funnily enough, after that, because I was using databases a lot, I was thinking, the way that we're building with databases isn't very effective. And so I kind of pitched. I didn't know this concept of startups. They don't really exist in New Zealand. So I found this millionaire and I kind of sent him an email and pitched him this idea of like an interface on top of a database that would make it very easy to build. And he outright rejected me. But of course, that's once again, like that was 15 years ago. And here I am today, essentially building the same thing.
That's amazing. And I think starting anything, you have to get used to a lot of rejection. A lot of things that you care about that nobody else cares about. A lot of, we were joking with Chris Van Pelt that when you're talking to people, you actually just see the top of their heads because they're still typing. It's one of those things where you never it's hard to get feedback from folks. One thing that you and I have talked about is this idea of, are you in a tunnel or a cave? So when things are tough, it's sometimes hard to know if it's a tunnel or a cave, where a tunnel is temporary and a cave is you've hit a dead end and you should maybe rethink about this. Like, how do you think about tunnel and caves when you're building a company, and any advice for folks?
Well, first of all, you should probably always assume you're in a cave. Always be skeptical about what you're building. We've got actually one of our core onboarding traits, and what we try to hire for is intellectual honesty. And largely it surfaces itself a lot in distributed companies, because you're alone programming. You can get really stuck in your idea, and a week goes by and you've got this sunk cost fallacy, right? So you just keep doing it. So in the onboarding call, we tell engineers that, intellectual honesty is super important for mitigating this. And then a lot of the processes that we do are designed to mitigate it. So we do RFCs in our company, requests for comments. And a lot of what that process is geared up to do is, first of all, ask what the problem is. And then it asks them to come up with not just a solution, but multiple solutions to the problem. And it largely stemmed from this idea that Charlie Munger has this concept where he's got a very good quote. I don't know exactly, but he says, the mind is like, a human egg. As soon as it's got an idea, it's impregnated with this idea, and you cannot let it go. And what you want to do is understand that that's going to happen, and that you need to design ways that you can actually release this idea. So coming up with at least 3 ways to solve a problem is a very good start. If you just come up with one, you'll truly believe that it is the only way.
It's interesting to me in everything that you talk about. You're very thoughtful in how you build a company and how you structure it. You have processes for everything. How do you hire people that will also do this when you're not in the room? What characteristics are you looking for? And then how do you indoctrinate is the wrong word. Teach them, inculcate your culture in them.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you can, we do say that Supabase is process driven, once again, in the onboarding call, and we call it out as an onboarding trait, and we tell people that, this is one of the traits that we look for and what we want you to embody. I think a lot of it just comes down to, what the, say, founders are doing a lot. We're writing down processes and principles, and we're saying it very often. The number of times, and actually, funnily enough, it goes back to your point, Karen, on a tunnel in a cave, we've got this concept of Kaizen, which means very incremental changes, comes from the Toyota production system. We've got a Slack channel just on Kaizen where anyone can suggest a change, not just on the product, but across the whole business. And we talk about Kaizen when we're doing shipping. It's just, one of the most frequent words that's said. And, if you do these things often enough, everyone will, of course, adapt. So I think it comes from the early DNA, spreads out, and then you've got the core members of the team kind of really soak that into their own DNA, and then they take it into the rest of the org.
One thing that you and Lavanya have in common is you spend a lot of time outside the United States. Neither one of you are from the US. Was that true, Lavanya? Where were you born?
India.
Okay, so neither one of you are from the US.
Where in India?
Near Delhi, an hour out.
And so much of Silicon Valley thought is that the world is around Silicon Valley. And do you feel that being from outside the US is a feature or a bug for both of you? And you both spend a lot of time outside the US. Not only are you from outside the US, you spend time outside the US. So how do you think about that? A lot of times people in Silicon Valley are like, that's a bug. I was like, is that a feature or a bug?
Paul.
You can start, Lavanya. I'm very interested in what your answer to this is.
So it's interesting because I started coding when I was 10, so my mental model of the world was Silicon Valley software, like, that was the thing. And then I moved to the US when I was 15, and like I was there for 15 years, and that's the only mental model that I knew. Most of my friends were programmers, so it was like not diverse at all. And then during the pandemic, I moved to India for a little bit, and then Europe. And like it was interesting because like when you're in the US, you think that's the only country that exists. That's the best country. This is how we do things. And like, and even within the US, it's like Silicon Valley, this is how we do things, But then suddenly I was like in London, and like I was looking at like how they're innovating, like the stuff that they're doing with in the financial industry is so much more advanced than the US. And suddenly you're like, wait, that is not, my way is not the only way, So I think I started picking up different mental models from different places that I lived in. And now I don't just have one mental model. One, I know my mental model is not the only one, so I should be adaptive, which didn't even occur to me. And second, like I have all these different options for mental models, which I think has made me a better thinker. And also I feel like it has made my life richer personally, because like I would go to all of these like different places in Paris and like London, which I wouldn't have done. Like I was just in like my own little apartment throwing like techie parties, So.
Very cool.
Paul.
Yeah, it's a good question. So if I wasn't running a tech company, specifically my type of tech company, which is the like developer tooling, then I think it couldn't have been as successful as it is without A, the period of COVID, and B, it has to be dev tools. So I think like if there was anything else, like for example, if I was starting an AI specific company now, it would have to be in Silicon Valley. That's just really one of the most important things. For now, I think like we've got enough traction that outside of the US and looking in, we, for example, when I visit the US, we already have a lot of customers in Silicon Valley, and strategically I can go in. So a really good example was there was the AI engineer conference the other day. We came in, I met a lot of our partners, the folks from LangChain and Llama Index and Swix who was organizing it. And this is very effective use of my time. But actually I parked up at Swix's his house for a couple of weeks, and it was super exciting because I'd going every night to another AI conference and a meetup. And one night I went to 3 different meetups, and I looked back on the things that were most effective. And it was really the AI engineer conference. That one summit was extremely effective. And then the hackathons, had diminishing returns. So I think it's a bit of a feature for our current stage of the business that we're extremely focused. We don't have to be too distracted. And then we can go in very strategically when it's important.
Can you both give me a prediction for what's going to happen in your industry in 3 years? Everything's worked. And I know, Lavanya, I'm putting you on the spot. And Paul, I'm putting you on the spot. So think about in the world of databases or vector databases or however, and Lavanya, when you think about everything that's being built in AI, 3-year prediction with everything going well.
What I'm the most excited about is the new kinds of companies that are going to emerge because of what these multimodal models make possible. So for example, everything is going to have an actual interface. So you can like literally just say, hey, I want to build a new home in my house. Show me some ideas. These are the ones I like. Now make it happen, right? So if that's the problem statement, like will it be Pinterest who builds that, or like a home renovation company who builds that, or like whoever, like Costco, or like whoever sells like the materials, or maybe it's a whole different type of company who just comes and owns that whole journey. So I'm like really excited when like how people are asking for what they want becomes different, and like the nature of the ask becomes so expansive. What are the kind of companies that come up to serve that?
Nice. From our side, yeah, I think specifically on the AI ML type future, then the thing that if you're willing to bet that is going to continue, then you can almost guarantee that everything needs to be turned into an embedding. Whether it's a photo, a video, some text, it needs to exist both in its raw content and as an embedding of some sort. And this is a huge, huge amount of data that then needs to be converted. So I think about things from a database point of view. If you want it to be useful in real time, you need it to be accessible to an operational database, say like Postgres, and you also need it to be extremely large in terms of file storage. So I think what we'll see is that there'll be a lot of the operational databases will start thinking more about how they can store huge amounts of data, either by sharding, partitioning, storing it in S3, and that's kind of the future where we're also driving towards. So it's pretty exciting. I think over the next 3 years, there'll be this spill out effects of this move, whereby big data, not just embeddings, but anything to do with analytical data, OLAP use cases will start being baked into more OLTP use cases as well.
Very excited for I love the idea, like everything is going to be stored in embeddings, and like how did we come up with ways like that would be so cool.
No, I don't know if it's extremely relevant to this audience, but as well, like maybe it is. So I might as well say it. A lot of what, say, Apple are bringing out, or even, Facebook, I think they just recently brought out some cameras, and a lot of that, like if you want to then start pushing into these sort of use cases, then not only is everything going to be turned into an embedding, but a lot of the real world, the spatial, everything spatial is also going to have to be stored. Objects where they live in physical space. So this is a super interesting paradigm as well, one that I think is an important future. I don't know how far away it is, but there's this convergence between raw data, spatial data, and embeddings that I think is going to produce a lot of like really, really interesting businesses.
I do think a lot of the AR work, that Apple and Meta are doing are going to help map a lot of this. And then it'll be interesting to see what the side effect is on that, like what that means to how we can tag and understand spatial information in a way that we can't today. And then a fun fact, Paul is on his phone. So this is all through the camera on his new iPhone, just to show how advanced these are, because I think it's really great quality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
It's his new phone, people. Yeah. I know.
I actually was talking to a streamer the other day at the YC meetup, and I asked him, what camera do I need to buy if I want to get into streaming? And he said, actually, if you're not a professional, you should buy an iPhone 15 Pro. That's actually probably the best that you can do. So that's what I've got.
Paul, thank you so much for coming and spending the time with us, for sharing about how you think about building a company. And I'm really excited for the future and of what's going to be possible. And thank you so much.
Thank you both for having me.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Gradient Dissent. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe to us, and we'll see you in the next episode.